going fast. Todd, this isn't going to be very good on that, I'm sure, on that video.
Okay.
But we stopped in Paris for about 3 hours, didn't we, Gene?
Yeah, they had to clean out the plane.
Clean the plane and all that before we went on to Israel, so it was a pretty long wait
Yeah,
there.
I can't remember, there was a partial wait, then it was longer than expected. They we got to Israel.
Here we arriving in Tel Aviv. Very pretty airport there. You had to get off though, get on a bus and take you from the plane into the airport. They didn't have anything that takes you in out of the weather, to the inside of the building. I was surprised that they didn't have it more like the modern airports. Okay,
There's a picture of Jerusalem.
there's Jerusalem, and that's a view taken from our hotel. Our hotel was up on the Mount of Olives. You looked out across the Kidron Valley and over to the city of Jerusalem. That's the Temple Square you see with the Dome of the Rock, the gold dome top there, where the temple used to sit. And you can see the wall around the city.
See the parts of the wall coming over.
This was our guide. This was Pharaoh Salem, S-A-L-E-M. He was a good guide, very well informed, very able. First day we toured all around Jerusalem in the outside the walled city, and at this point we're at a oh, I know. This is where the yeah, as I say, we got to get briefed. We got to learn our own lesson. This is where Jesus taught his disciples the Lord's Prayer, down in a grotto or a cave, which is down. You go down those steps into there, and you see the grotto where supposedly a lot of Israel is full of caves, grottos, and that sort of thing. And people in that day and time used them as havens of refuge and places where they dwelt. And a lot less living in houses than they were living out in these places like this.
That was inside there.
This is down inside that area where he met with his disciples and taught them the Lord's Prayer. That's John Galloway in the back next to Martha, and his wife is in the white jacket. They were our other two from Columbus, Georgia, that went with us. The others were from near Fredericksburg, Virginia. Outside, around this church, which was built on the site of the Lord's Prayer, they have 80 translations of the Lord's Prayer in different dialects and languages, and they're all the way around the walls outside. Very beautifully done.
Yes, a bit there.
That's sort of a courtyard. It goes around, and all those mosaics or whatever of the Lord's Prayer are along the walls within that arcade. That was the English version. Then just not far from there, this is all over on the Mount of Olives.
Right close to where we were staying, actually.
This is the point of ascension. This is where Christ supposedly went up into heaven left the disciples and ascended into heaven. And they built this little monument, you might say, to the ascension. It first was an open area with those arches, and then later the Muslims came along and blocked them all in and filled them in. But this was supposed to be the point from which he ascended. This was one of the most fascinating places. You know where that is? That's the Garden of Gethsemane. See the olive trees, Andrew? Those olive trees are hundreds and hundreds of years old, maybe almost two of them may be as old as the time of Christ, 2,000 years ago. It's amazing how the roots are old and yet new green growth comes out from the top of those old stumps, and they bear olives right there. This is another view of the eastern gate, or the beautiful gate of the wall. That's the gate where supposedly Christ would return and enter the city of Jerusalem through those gates. And so the Muslims again have bricked up the gates trying to keep it from coming in. The idea of blocking it in. Now that's probably the oldest tree in the Garden of Gethsemane,
See, they got it.
supposedly 2,000 years old. It looked it.
It really did. You could believe it was that, it had been there that long. It was amazing. It was there. We need some less light in here.
I'll have to skip that one. I can't tell what
That
the
was inside the
Yeah.
chapel.
This is called the
at
Rock of
Gethsemane.
Agony. You know, a lot of this stuff, it may be and it may be false, but you know that you're in the very vicinity of where all these things happen, whether they're exactly the thing or not. But inside, right next to the Garden of Gethsemane, is the Church of All Nations, a very beautiful church. And inside there is this rock, right up in the center of the church. And you see how they've got a crown of thorns, ironwork around it. But that's supposed to be the rock on which Christ agonized before his arrest and crucifixion.
It had some beautiful pictures.
Formations, someone had carved a picture of Christ at the rock in agony. And it just
I
carved
don't
it to
see
one of
it.
the
Oh
rocks.
yes, I do see it.
But I thought it was an interesting piece of work. That's another view of
Oh
the
my.
garden.
How big is it?
Oh, about like a city block, what's left of it. You see the Church of All Nations there to the left, and the block of trees and flowers left in this area.
Now, is this the garden where everything was blooming? Roses and nasturtiums?
No, there were some flowers blooming there, but I think there were other parts of Jerusalem where she saw more of that. Just outside that Garden of Gethsemane, of course, they always find the camels, and people were, charging for you to ride on a camel if you wanted to do it. The smelly old animals and ugly. And then, one tourist who had been on there about a week earlier had tried to befriend the face of the camel, and he bit her arm, had to take stitches in, take her to the hospital. Also, this is all in that same vicinity. That door goes back to a place that was supposed to be where the disciples stayed while he went apart to pray. And they were asleep. It's called I think it was called the Grotto of Agony or something like that. It was where they were sleeping. And right here, you go down in here, and this is supposedly the burial place of Mary's parents, Anna and
Joachim or something.
Joachim.
Joachim.
her parents supposed to be buried there. They were brought there for burial close to the garden. This is another view riding on the outside of the wall of Jerusalem, looking back, and those are cemeteries that you see out there on the field. Those white markers are just graves. It seems that all of them are buried outside the wall of Jerusalem. The Muslims, the Christians, and the Jews, all looking for Christ to come back, or Muhammad to come back, or somebody to be coming back to that point. So they all want to be buried close to the wall.
Judgment will come then.
That's the idea.
And so they want to be close to the place.
Down into the wall, the mountainside itself, were these monuments down there. One was a tomb of Absalom. One was honoring Zacharias, and who was the third one? I forgot the third one. But there were three different Old Testament characters that were being remembered in those special markers. We didn't go down there, we just saw it from the bus. That's a closer view of them.
Yeah.
These are some views just around Jerusalem. We went from here over to across the Kidron Valley and up toward the Temple Mount. We didn't go inside the wall, but we went to places that were associated with Christ outside the wall, such as the place where Peter denied his Lord, and where the disciples met in the upper room, and all of this was on the, I guess you'd call it the south side of Jerusalem. Get a better view of it.
Eastern side, probably, huh?
No, we want eastern side at the Mount of Olives.
That's what I thought.
And then
Okay,
we've
this
come
is
across
south.
now on the south side.
Okay, I see what you mean.
And this is a view over toward the area where Judas Iscariot was buried. The potter's field is over there to the left side of the picture. And this is the area where in the period of Christ was the slum area of the city, you might say, the valley of
Gehenna.
Gehenna.
This is looking at from near the church of, called St. Peter of Gallicantu. And that's where, and Gallicantu is Latin for the cock crows.
We are on a little balcony area outside that church, looking back over this eastern side of Jerusalem, and I mean southern side of Jerusalem, and it's from the point where Peter denied his Lord. See the cock up on top of the church. They were working on the church, had a lot of reconstruction going on, but the church is supposedly built over the place where he denied him 3 times before the cock crew.
This was one of the most interesting places I thought about.
It's another view of that same church. They built a church over nearly every point they could find a place to build a church. Now these steps are supposedly steps that Christ probably walked on, because he would go from Bethany 2 miles out of Jerusalem and walk into Jerusalem, go down across the Kidron Valley from the Mount of Olives and back up to the city and go to the upper room where he would meet with his disciples. And these stones are part of that walkway that went over to the upper room from the Kidron Valley. These are steps that go down to the valley. So he would come up those steps and to the area where the upper room was located. And we are inside Caiaphas' house when Christ was taken to Caiaphas to judge him, and the Jews were trying to get him crucified. And it seems that he was brought there at a time that he would have to keep him overnight.
Was it a night they brought
Well,
him?
they brought him
from
at
the-
night, but they
from
couldn't take him till the next day.
Gethsemane,
They couldn't take him till the next day before the Roman authorities. So Caiaphas had to keep him overnight in his house where there were prisons, where they locked up various prisoners. But down in the bottom of it was a dungeon. That's no windows. You just go down into a dungeon, windowless room, and they put people who were condemned to die down in there and kept them. And that's probably the room in which he was kept overnight until they took him to the Roman authorities. Then coming out of there, Gene, I'm trying to think now which gate this was. We didn't go in at this point. We passed by this gate. Was this Stephen's gate or not?
I don't know.
Well, I can't tell you until I look at my notes. This is a church that's built on the site of where Mary, what? Gene,
I don't know.
you know the big church up by the upper room. I mean, it's
Oh, yeah, that's the church where the
Mary.
Christ's mother, that Mary.
that's what I'm talking about.
There was some,
She came back from Egypt. Isn't that where they located when they came back from Egypt? And they built a church there to honor Mary there. It's a very fine big church, but that didn't have a great deal of significance. Now this is supposed to be the upper room, and of course it's probably a reconstructed upper room, because
everything in
Titus
Jerusalem
destroyed
was
so much in
destroyed.
70 AD that it probably was destroyed, and the fact that it has these buttresses and arches in there makes you wonder if it wasn't done, reconstructed
time of
after
the
Romans came
Crusades.
there, or when the Crusades were there. But anyway, it's supposed to be the right site.
It's the location of the upper room.
And when we went in there, we could hardly look at the room because there was a big group of Pentecostals in there, and they were having a service, and it was right impressive, to tell you the truth. But
Yes, it was.
we had to stand back and wait on them. They were singing, and raising the hands and praising, and and chanting, and really it was a very emotional group, as they generally are. But it was very impressive in that particular room to hear them.
And you could hear them for so far. The sound in there carried so well, and you come out of that big church right next to it, adjoining it, and you come in and you heard all of this sound, all of this singing and praising going on.
It looks like there were stones and then some were missing.
Well, you see, it looked like it plastered sort of afterwards, and so I don't know whether those stones could go back to the original or not.
No.
And you think it was all destroyed, Gene? I don't know that everything was destroyed in every detail. The temple was destroyed, but you don't know everything in Jerusalem was destroyed. Not everything. Oh, come on. I don't think so. The Romans wouldn't have wanted it. What did they want it for if they had nothing left?
They were so provoked with those Jews that
I know,
they destroyed the whole thing.
Anyway, evidently this was rebuilt anyway in that part. And I haven't yet to tell you what this is. I need to look in my records in my diary. We were on the road. We left here and rode down to Bethlehem. And on the way to Bethlehem, we passed by this, and the guy told us about it, and I wrote it down, but I can't right at the moment tell you what it was signifying. This is the Church of Nativity. This is where Christ was supposedly born. It's a huge church. It's got three different groups: the Christians and the Protestants and the Catholics and the Armenians and what else, Gene?
The Greek Orthodox.
Oh yeah, they all got different chapels and sections in the church that they built there.
Whole area. It's an enormous building, and it is the one thing that was not destroyed by the church, that was not destroyed by other groups.
But the door you see right straight in the center, you have to bow down and go in it. The Crusaders blocked up the door, I think, to keep from taking some animals in there. Wasn't that what they told us? Camels or something?
So.
But you have to dip down to go in there.
To get in the church.
And again, this was in the main sanctuary. You can see two layers of floor. You see the mosaics on the bottom floor, and then got boards over top of it on a different level where the church is today versus the church centuries earlier when they had that mosaic floor down below, being preserved real well. And of course, here is all the to-do over the site of Christ's birth. The star there, supposedly the site of his birth.
The star is where the manger was.
And it's hard for me to visualize that the manger was in a place like that. It just leaves me cold.
All marble and dressed up. And
I like the natural settings so much better than these. But anyways, that is evidently the location in Bethlehem where it all took place.
And right close by, over on another side, just within room area, was what looked like it, they said, was another place where the manger, or where the baby could have been laid. And it was more realistic to me because it didn't have all of that. It was just rocks.
I didn't get this as one of those Mickey says about focusing right. I was trying to get the plaque that's on the wall, and I cut it off. I didn't get my focus right. But this was almost like a dungeon down there, catacombs or whatever, where Jerome stayed for 38 years translating the Bible into the Latin Vulgate. And so it was a real important step in the history of Christianity that he spent 38 years down there translating. There were two women who came there and cooked for him and tended to him and helped to take care of him while he did this work of translation.
He was buried there till they moved him to Rome.
This is another view of that Church of Nativity from a different angle.
That was the Catholic chapel part there. That was called St. Catherine's Chapel. And then that's the outside as we came back out and we took that picture.
This is supposed to be Shepherd's Field. We
down
went out
in
from
front.
Bethlehem for about a mile or more, and you passed through country where there were sheep grazing in all the fields, and there were shepherds out with their sheep in robes, looked like they might have been in Jesus' time. It's amazing, you know, that people were still doing it like that. Shepherds in very colorful robes. They weren't doing it for tourists. I mean, it was just their livelihood. They were just tending their sheep out there. But you go out to a particular landscape area, and that's called Shepherd's Field, where they say there are about 3 or 4 different locations that people think was where the shepherds were on the night of Christ's birth. But this is the one the guide thought was the most authentic one.
And those are almond trees there that we were talking about, how many of them bloom in different places.
On our way back into town, we came by Rachel's tomb. Rachel was buried separately. I mean, over in
Rachel was
Hebron.
the wife of Jacob.
Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Leah and all those were buried at Hebron, but Rachel was buried over here near Bethlehem.
Because she died there.
Because she died there. Yes, good reason.
Because she was,
But
Benjamin, her youngest son, was born.
it was hard to
And
get
she didn't live through
a picture in there because there were so many Jewish rabbis in there. That was an interesting thing all around Jerusalem, of the very extremely Orthodox Jews who wear their black hats and black outfits, put on their prayer shawls, wear the phylacteries on their over their eyes and the forehead, and they have their Torah or whatever, and they are reading it, and that's taken out of a bus window, so it looks dirty up there at the top. It is dirty, but that's the Church of All Nations down by the Garden of Gethsemane that we saw earlier. Now we're up at the second day, and we're going to go inside the Temple Mount, and they're doing lots and lots of excavations all over Israel, but this is excavations around the Temple Mount. The Temple Mount, I guess, I don't know how many acres, but it's a pretty big oblong area.
big area.
It has room now for the Dome of the Rock, the big Catholic,
Muslim.
when I say Catholic, I mean Muslim, and then a big Muslim mosque inside the Temple
In other
Square.
words, 2 huge
Well, one of
mosques.
them's not a mosque. One's the
Well-
mosque and one's the Dome of the Rock, which is just an honoring and a ceremonial thing. It's not a place they go to pray.
Okay.
And but here they're excavating, trying to find some of the earliest foundations of the temple from Solomon's day.
And this is, that over there is the part of the old temple wall in the background, isn't it, Charles? That's the part that
Prove,
was,
I mean, this is
this-
the Wailing Wall. You've heard about the Wailing Wall. That's the one wall remaining from the time of Jesus of the temple area. It's a supporting wall to the Temple Mount, and it's the one left. All the rest has been rebuilt, built by the Muslims. But this is the one wall built by the Jews in the days of Herod, in the time of Christ. And so that's where the Jews go and pray, by that wall.
it's a temple, it's considered a synagogue or a worship place, and they divided it. The women had to go to one side, and the men had to go to the other. And Charles is showing you the men's side of it, because that's
See, the people go down there and they pray, and they stick their prayers in the cracks of the rock. They're on little pieces of paper.
Under there, it looked like little pieces that you.
But I thought that was, that again, I like the reality of things and not the glamorized. And I like the fact that those stones were actually 2,000 years old. I mean, they've been there since the time of Christ. And where the men went inside, near the Wailing Wall, it was an inside area you could go into. And it was filled with these Orthodox Jews in their prayer time. See, those white things they put around are called the prayer shawls. I don't think I have a good one to show the phylactery on the forehead. It's a little black box of scripture that they tie around the head.
That you read about in the Bible, but you
Yeah.
know, you just, so usual to see.
And although this is not a video camera, if it were, you'd see them all doing this way. They're all bowing and reading all at the same time.
Because you're supposed to love God with your whole heart and mind and body.
And so their body is
And
moving
so
as they
you're
read.
moving.
There were a lot of them that were the extreme. There's some that are sort of frightening to the Israeli government because they're so extreme. You know, all. And there I am at the Wailing Wall. And now we're going up to the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock was built in about the 6th century, I believe it was, by the Muslims. So it's a very, very old building, even so, but it's a beautiful building. Beautiful. The King Hussein, I believe it was, just recently gave him the gold to cover the dome again with gold leaf or whatever. And the sides, you see the colorfulness of the mosaic patterns that they have on the outside. They're tiles, little tiles, making those designs. And then they make you take your shoes off, and then you can go inside.
You can't carry anything with you. You
Had to leave my cameras and everything outside. We had one fellow in the group who would guard our things while the rest of us went in.
Yeah, the mosaics are elegant. And inside, they'll tell them what's the rock that's in there.
Okay, you tell them. Go ahead.
That's Al-Aqsa Mosque.
But out in the courtyard from the Dome of the Rock is this point, which is supposed to be the site of the original temple location, was where the Ark of the Covenant was at one time in the temple in the days of Solomon.
And you know, when they got the site for the temple, it was from the threshing floor of Arona the Jebusite that David bought the place for the
This
temple.
is supposed to be the threshing floor location.
And that
and
right
so
spot under that little dome there is a level spot they say would have been suitable for a threshing floor. And that was the spot that our guide said was the threshing floor of Arona.
And then we're still up on the temple square, and we're looking down at those eastern gates that we saw from the other side a while ago that had been bricked up.
And that was where we got into some really interesting stuff.
Now, this is where we're getting ready to go to, the Pool of Bethesda.
That is
Now, the Pool of Bethesda was where the crippled man was lying there and said, nobody will put me in the water when it's trouble, so I can't get well, and Christ healed him there by the Pool of Bethesda. But it's now, the excavations are enormous there, and it covers, I guess about a city block or nearly a city block.
It was like maybe 2 football fields or something.
It was enormous. I had no
It
idea
had
that
one
the Pool of
going
Bethesda
this
was
way
that
and
big.
One going this one had two inscription in it.
See, where is this now?
That's,
It's still near the same
is
place
that's
because
at
that's
the
the church.
Church of St. Anne.
Church of St. Anne,
And
yeah.
St. Anne was a mother of Mary. Beautiful little park right adjoining that Church of St. Anne. And it was right next to where the Pool of Bethesda was. It's the same, another view of that same park.
Now we're starting on the Via Dolorosa, the walk that Jesus made from the time that he was condemned to the cross. And
Fascinating things too.
now that was
That's
crown of
inside.
thorns in the design at the top of that. Christ was supposed to have been, brought here to this part of the town for
In the Roman hearing with
in the
Pilate.
hearing with Pilate, right? And down in the floor,
You
this
see
is
that
part of what
floor
still
angle?
remains of Fort Antonio.
See some
is
lines
that
in the floor.
Down in the lower level where the prisoners were kept, these are games that were played by the soldiers who guarded the prisoners in the fortress on the
There was
walkway.
another place where they showed that where he spoke to the daughters of Jerusalem, the poor women who had come up from the valley to bemoan his fate.
It's all this Via Dolorosa Road was like this. It's very narrow streets. And according to our guide, it probably was 10 feet down or
More
more.
than that, more than
anyway, that's been built up, you know, over the centuries, so that it, while it's over there, right above that dress,
Abu chocolate or whatever.
you see it?
Yeah.
Anyway, we went in there and had a Arab type concoction. It was a little,
Snack lunch.
it was a pita bread filled with
Sandwich.
stuff, and they filled it with, they take
Chickpeas.
chickpeas and make little round balls that look
Mash
like
'em up
hush
with-
puppies,
Mash
and they
'em up
cook
with
them in
garlic
oil,
and
you know, and
spices.
fry them in oil, a little round thing. Barrels of shops, and all these little shops were just in that little narrow street. Some of it had beautiful vegetables and beautiful fruit. Then you'd find the meat market. Then you'd find jewelry shops and all kind of other things. But
Moved out of the Arab section, they had most of them with this stuff. and then
Arab
they moved
section
on.
was very crude and very primitive. And then you got to a section that was Jewish, and it was very modern.
Yeah, beautiful stuff.
We
over
fixed
there.
it up a lot.
Metal.
And that's a Lutheran church.
It has been there for a long
Been there a very long time.
And that's real close to the end of the vehicle was.
Now we go into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is supposed to be Calvary, where Christ was crucified. And this is supposed to be the site of his crucifixion, but it's of course inside the Church of Holy Sepulchre, and it's all fancied with all this to do. Didn't look right to me. And that's supposed to be the rock at Calvary that split when the earthquake occurred at his crucifixion. And they've got it under glass there right there next to the crucifixion. And then this is the tomb where he was buried. Supposedly the garden tomb is inside this very fancy place. You go in there and you go down some steps, and there's a little tiny area where you know, a body could have been laying. That is supposed to, it all seemed to me to be not right in that the Calvary. That's the,
This is a present gates of Jerusalem, which of course were not located the same place as those where we went out from the whole church of the Holy Sepulchre and went out that gate, which is the Damascus gate, isn't it, Charlie?
well, they're trying to show you that the level there, that lower arch, might have been the level at which Christ might have left the
Yeah,
city and gone out to Calvary
right.
through that lower archway. Now this looked more realistic. See, this is the other version. About a block away from here is the hill called the Hill of the Skull. See, you're supposed to see his eyes and the skull there
See
in the
skull
formation of the land.
formations and the rock up there.
And that this was Calvary, and that he was crucified on this hillside, which is called the Hill of the Skull. And this was Calvary. So it's all within about a block of each other and all, but it just looks more realistic here. And
That's
this,
Beautiful
now we're
garden.
going over to the grave, to the garden tomb, the tomb that is supposed to have been the tomb of
Joseph.
Joseph of Arimathea, who gave him a tomb to bury his body in. And you go down these steps and you can see the tomb there in the center where the people are, where the body was supposed to have been laying. This was a wine press right there in that same
Olive
garden.
press, wasn't it?
A what?
Olive press.
Olive press. I've said a wine press. I mean olive press. There was an olive press right there in the garden.
It was a beautiful little garden.
This is the door to the garden tomb. You go inside, and in there, one place was made for a person to be buried. See that carved out area there to the left? They have placed for two graves in there, but the one on the right had not been carved out, but the one on the left had, and that supposedly is, it certainly goes back to the tomb, and that kind of situation goes back to the period of 2,000 years ago. That little rock piece you see out in front of the tomb is a place where the rolling stone could be rolled down over the entrance to the tomb, and the stone's not there, but there's a little groove that the stone would have rolled down back and forth to cover it, and that we Kidron Valley. Looking on that toward the Yehannon side of the valley. And that was our hotel.
Y'all didn't get a card before you left that we'd sent.
Sent them
We
a card like that,
a
didn't
card
you?
like that.
Judea, the wilderness, as Jesus went out to the wilderness for 40 days. And out there are the Bedouins. And they're,
Jerusalem to Jericho.
well, it's on the road from Jerusalem to Jericho in this part. But on that road from Jerusalem to Jericho, you go, immediately you drop down from the height of Jerusalem about 2,000 feet down to the below sea level to the Dead Sea. And so you go right quickly, winding roads down, sharp with shacks over there.
See,
That's the
those
kind of
little
place they
shacks, little tents over there.
live, their little shacks. That's one of the little girls I took a picture of. She was right cute.
Oh, they love.
They run out to get money and to get anything you'll give them, out there with the Bedouins. That's the wilderness of Judea.
That's from one going down to Jericho. There was just a little faint green grass on there. They say that's
Enough for
the
those
last
sheep
time
and
we
goats to
looked.
eat, I guess, but you see a little tiny bit of green, but it's mighty little. Certainly is desolate looking
It's just
country.
that one time of year that you have that much green showing.
Now we've reached Masada.
No, you
No, I
haven't.
haven't. Yes, I have.
No, you
yes,
haven't.
I have. Yes, I have.
Qumran.
Oh, excuse me. I'm sorry. I used the wrong word. Qumran monastery or whatever the Essenes had, and this was their scripture room where they did the translating of the Bible onto the Dead Sea Scrolls. Our guide is an archaeologist, and he had worked on this project, and so he was very proud of it that they'd done all this excavation down here, and you could get some idea of the type of terrain that is there. You see the people up on the top up there, and you see the hole in the side of the cliff down there. That's one of the caves where they found some of the scrolls. How they got up in there and put them in there, I don't know how they got them out. But anyway, that's the kind of place where they were buried.
They said you had to be a rock climber now to get in those places.
That was another close-up. See those holes in there? They found some of them in that part.
It was over about 10 years that they kept finding.
They
these.
found all the scriptures except the book of Esther. All the rest were 2,000 years ago, were
That is all
almost
of the Old
almost the
Testament
same as our
books.
present copies of the Bible. They found
All
them
the
almost
Old
the same
Testament.
of the Old Testament, of course. Okay, we moved on down. We're riding down by the Dead Sea, and that incidentally was a pretty body of water. I thought it would be an ugly body of water. It was clear as it could be, and pretty, just like a pretty lake. It'll hold you up because it's the salt sea, and you can't sink in it. And it felt slimy to your fingers when you got the water on your hand. It felt oily, sort of. But it looked pretty just to look at it. And that's Masada, that big little hump of a mountain that's in the middle out by itself. And
Where
they
Right.
built it out.
line
They've gone back there and put
around
rocks out there to mark off where the Roman camp was. And that line along there was a Roman line of siege.
Fortification of some sort.
They were trying to come up from the mountain, but they couldn't.
And
Now you're looking down in part of Herod's palace. You can't see much there, but you see it still doesn't show the perspective, but that's hanging off the cliff on the edge. This one shows it better probably here. Well, that doesn't show that, but that's another one of the Roman fortifications. You see that square? That's where they were encamped below the fortress trying to take it.
they had about 8 camps, I think, around it.
And right here, that little mound of dirt that you see with a look like a little cave at the top, that's where they buried the bodies of all the Jews that were found dead up there when they finally got up there. They took their bodies down and buried them in that grave, in that little heap of dirt.
The Romans left them in Masada and buried them, but the Jewish, according to the Jewish rules, so they had to move them. So back in
They have to
modern
be buried
times,
outside the house.
in modern times, they had to be buried outside, so that's why they buried them back in the last
Isn't that
50
desolate looking
years,
country
I'd
though?
say.
That gives you some perspective of it. You see people up there on the edge of the Masada right up at the top of the picture. And then down below you see part of Herod's palace is sticking out below. They built it just off the edge of that. And they had caves back in the mountain that the slaves went through to bring supplies down and out to them. They dug caves through there to get the supplies to them. But that's way up. I don't know how many feet up it is, but they're beginning to build it up to come up to fill it in to where they can make a ramp going up. And that's the way that, according to the guy, that's the way they did go up finally, but there was no opposition because all of them were dead on top, so they didn't have any trouble going on up finally. Now that shows you inside there, one of the mosaics. You can see where the Romans had laid that floor out of all those little tiles. And it looked like a modern beach. They put the umbrellas out there and all that for people to go in the sea. But it was a pretty body of water.
It was, and it was people out there just floating around.
And there we are by the Dead Sea. You can see how clear that water is. And the people are floating. Can't sink in there, Andrew. The salty water holds you up. There's no way for you to go down and look realistic. This is Lazarus' tomb. That's supposedly where Lazarus was put. And Jesus said, come forth. And he came wrapped in his grave cloths and got up and came out of the grave. You go down some very steep steps down into a very difficult place to get to where the tomb was located, where the grave site was placed for the body to be placed. And it, again, may not be the right site, but it certainly could have been. It was very typical of what it was. That was nearby there, wasn't it, Gene?
Yeah, that's still
That's
part
same
of
church.
Same church.
The Mary and Martha's home site. Now, this is John the Baptist. That was the home of St. John the Baptist there. Yeah. His birthplace. See the sign? St. John Baptist.
Yeah. I don't see it, but that's all
Well,
right.
your site, site's bad, isn't it? I can't read what that is in there. I'll have to skip that one
That
out.
must have been St. John the Baptist too.
May have been where he was born, I'm not sure. Okay, change. This is Friday, the last day we were in Jerusalem, and this is the modern part of Jerusalem. This is the Holocaust Museum. Holocaust Museum. Those are stones from Galilee that make the base of this room, where they've got a dedication to the people whose lives were lost in the Holocaust. I don't have a picture inside there, but they had Gene, how many people were lost? To show it was the children's exhibit
Children's Museum.
dedicated to the children who lost their lives in the Holocaust.
1.5 million.
And what they did was they had some candles and mirrors so that they reflected lights.
They had like 5 candles to start with.
And the candles and the mirrors reflected the million children, the million lights, the 1.5 million lights to commemorate the 1.5 million children. You'd walk through it. It was a beautifully done thing. It put everything in perspective for you. You could go around it and see exactly how Jerusalem was then versus, what you see today. But you can see the Temple Mount is what you see right over on the top of the picture over there. And the temple is the little box that you see in the center. And over to the left, those 4 towers is Antonio's fortress that I was telling you about. You see, it was a big fortification that was right next to Temple Mount. I'll show you some others that were closer up. And that's showing the Temple Mount from this end from the south end of the town. City of David was off there to the right. That shows you what supposedly was the oldest part of Jerusalem. This is, if you can, I'm sorry that the way the picture's taken, this other wall block gets into the picture, but this shouldn't be seen because this is way off in the distance. But that's the temple, the Herod's temple, and this is the temple square, and the things that are around it. But the way it comes right on top of that, it looks like that stone wall's on top of the temple, but it isn't. But the temple was like, and how the temple square looked in the time of Jesus. over to a hospital,
Oh,
and Mark Chagall, the famous stained glass artist, has put in 12 windows in this chapel for the 12 tribes of Israel, and they were perfectly beautiful. And I bought these slides, and I haven't had time to study it, but we have a write-up that explains each window and what's in it, what's the design is all about. But they were beautiful.
Genesis and find that, it's the same.
Huh?
I say you need to go, they quote Genesis, the scripture,
Yeah, but you need to read all about these different ones to know what it.
it helps.
But the
It
color
helps.
was just beautiful in that
The
chapel.
joy of the colors is so pretty. Do you like those color stanzas?
Give you some inspiration to do you some artwork. Go back and do you a Chagall window. It seems he had learned some new way of combining the stained glass. That was an improvement over the old lead system that was used in the old cathedrals. And so he was able to do much more with it than they had been able to in their day. That's it. And that's the Knesset, the Israeli Parliament building. Very beautiful modern building. I think it looks like Lincoln Center. I mean, not Lincoln Center, but Kennedy Center in Washington in shape and the sort of the design of it. And that's where the Dead Sea Scrolls are kept in that museum, shaped in the shape of the lids of the jars that they found in the caves. They were right clever, wasn't it? That's the shape of the lids of the jars.
You go down
And
underneath
he got a lot,
now.
exhibit goes way on down underneath, and they show you the Dead Sea Scrolls. Some of them were shown, of course a lot of them were. That's the King David Hotel, one of the, I guess, most famous hotel in Jerusalem, where all the correspondents used to go when there was warfare over there. You'd hear about them broadcasting and saying we're in the King David Hotel. That was our other leader of the tour, minister from Fredericksburg, Virginia, on the donkey.
Don Wiggins. That's his name.
Now we're going down, starting on our way to Galilee, so we had to go again from Jerusalem to Jericho. So we're going down through the wilderness again. And this is where Martha broke her ankle right here.
Well, it's a pretty big ditch.
It was pretty big. She fell in there and got hurt.
Glad
Now,
she didn't roll all the way down.
as you can see it, there's a monastery down there. And it doesn't show anything like the depth that it did in reality. This is way down. And there's a monastery built over here on the side, and a little trail that goes in through here that supplied them. But we were way up above looking down on it. And it was up on top of that hill where we were taking this picture that the Bedouins were selling jewelry and trying to get Martha to buy some more jewelry, and she stumbled over the rock and fell down.
Y'all saw one of those pathway that went back to the monastery.
And this is the site of the more recent Jericho, the excavating in there now.
That was one that was built by Herod, wasn't it?
It's about the time of Herod that Jericho was there. It now looks like an oasis. Well, that's a sycamore tree, like Zacchaeus went up in the sycamore tree in Jericho. Well, that's a sycamore tree.
Beth, you sing about Zacchaeus in the sycamore tree?
I thought you'd know about that. That's the kind of tree he was in.
That's just.
Said, "Come down and I'll have dinner with you today," Jesus said. And so he went and had dinner with him, didn't he? And here's excavations that are going on in the old tale of Jericho, where the walls fell down. And that's some of the excavations, and it doesn't show you lots, but You can see some of the stones and such sticking out of the wall down there where they found certain things.
In different levels.
You have to have an archaeologist to explain all that, but it shows different levels of civilization.
Cities in the world.
You see the irrigation that's been done at Jericho and how an oasis of green it is down there. That's where they grow all the beautiful fruits and vegetables that are so abundant over there. It's down in this valley by the Dead Sea
And
the Jordan River. And those excavations are supposed to be where Rahab lived, because when the when the Hebrews came in and the walls came tumbling down, they destroyed the city of Jericho, except Rahab's house. They left it because she had befriended the spies, and so
it was on the outside along the wall.
it was a part of the wall. It was on the
Yeah.
edge of the wall, and this is the only one house they found that was still there, so they're assuming that was Rahab's house. This is the spring, Gene, Elisha spring.
You know, there was a story where Elijah had, how they came to Elisha and said the spring, the water is bitter and it's not any good, and he purified the water for them, but he tell them to put in.
I've forgotten.
But anyway, the water became pure, and Elisha's spring is still a wonderful source of water for them. And they had rocks from Elisha's spring, and I got a handful of rocks from Elisha's spring. I have one for you there. It's from Elisha's spring.
They're still using it. It's still flowing a lot of water. Went from there over to Bet Shean, and a place that I wasn't familiar with, but according to the Bible, it's the place when Saul and Jonathan were killed in battle. They took their heads there and hung them on the gateposts of the city of Beth Shean. And so it goes way, and you can see the stage. Looking back, you see those columns in the far back was a colonnaded street in the city. So it had become quite a Roman city in this period of time that they're excavating right there. But it was the same site of the city that was there when Saul was killed. And this jumps to the bottom. This is where we ate lunch. It's sort of like a Chick-fil-A place or whatever.
Couldn't get quite high enough to see the sign. I think it said, what did it say? Crispy. It was just Crispy was the only sign on it. And you've gone on to Nazareth, haven't you?
Yeah, I believe this.
That's Nazareth.
Yeah.
And that's this church where
Mary's well was located.
Mary's well was located, but it's not the right kind of job for the kind that Jesus' time used. But it was, but there were some others in another location that we saw. But anyway, that's where it was. It was in the church there.
And that's some stone that goes back to the early foundations of where probably the wedding feast was held and where they was drinking wine. Thought you'd want to see that one, Andrew. That was McDonald's.
To see Mickey D. Did you know there was a Mickey? I think that's the only Mickey D in all of Israel, wasn't it?
I think some people wanted to see the Jordan River, and the guides kept saying, "Well, you'll see it later. We'll show it to you later." You rode by it a long time, but this is a place that they have really fixed up for the tourists to see the Jordan River. It's where it comes out of the lake, the Sea of Galilee. And that's lots of water right there. It had a lot of rain, so it's heavier than usual in the amount of water that's there. But they fixed it up real nice. You can see how they've got stone works that you go down and take steps, and you can go down to the water, put your hand in the water, go in there and be baptized if somebody wants to be baptized in the Jordan. There's several points along there that they fixed up real nice for you to get down to the water. So it's a pretty river. I thought that was a pretty view of it. That's as it goes on out the other way away from the Sea of Galilee. It looked very tranquil and, very natural looking. And now that's the Sea of Galilee.
And this is our
And we're in our hotel. We had a very beautiful modern hotel. You thought you were at Miami Beach, I guess. It seems strange on the Sea of Galilee, but looking out our balcony window, you'd look out on the Sea of Galilee at sunset.
Another big hotel in the lake, but it was.
But it was a natural setting, and I liked it. That's the Sea of Galilee. The next morning we got on a boat, went out in the Sea of Galilee, and had a worship service in the middle of the sea, and then moved on up toward Capernaum and toward the end of the lake from Tiberias. This was at Tiberias that we had our hotel, and so that's looking back at Tiberias. And this is where Martha got her first aid, and at Tiberias, you see, when we got there after that full day of touring, she got to the clinic. We said it had a swimming pool and a fine auditorium and cafeteria, and that shows the auditorium part. That's on the Sea of Galilee. It was quite a fancy place for rich Jews who wanted to live the kibbutz type life. This is the Mount of the Beatitudes. That's where Christ preached the Sermon on the Mount along the Sea of Galilee. Beautiful spot, looked very realistic. We had a little chapel there built called the Chapel of the Beatitude. It was very pretty.
That's called the Chapel of the Beatitude. And it was a real new one compared to all the others. It was built in the 1930s, I think. And
That's around
there was
the
a
church.
garden outside the Beatitude Church.
And from there we went all the way up to the base of Mount Hermon.
Right up into
And
the
this is the
Golan
source.
Heights
This is the
almost.
source of the Jordan. And this is water coming out of that, from that cave and through there, and beginning of the Jordan River. There are several other tributaries that join into it, but this is the main source of the Jordan, where it begins. This is up at Caesarea Philippi. And down around Caesarea Philippi, the guide took us down on a little back road to show us an old Roman aqueduct. This is from a bridge looking at the water pouring down. They built a mill down there. See, there's the little bridge that I'm taking the picture from. And up over top of there, that we just come through that little tunnel, was an aqueduct up above. And the aqueduct was providing water to turn a mill wheel for an old mill that goes back to Roman times. And this man was making a type of bread, he and his wife.
That's the mill now.
Girl, when she got them this big, she'd turn them over and throw them on top of that hot skillet thing over there. It's rounded with fire underneath it, and it's hot. She throws that dough on top, and it bakes on top of that iron piece.
It's so thin and crisp.
Very thin and good. It's real good.
It was,
Comes off like that,
see
and you
how
can just break you off a piece of crisp bread.
seeing the lighting there, how thin it
Very primitive thing, but very interesting.
is. They were the Druze
Yeah.
people, Druze.